I did it on behalf of every Filipino person whose human rights have been abused by the government of President Marcos and the government of President Duterte before him.
Senator Shauna Rice, Australian senator who protested during President Bongbong Marcos' guesting at the Chamber of the House of Representatives, Australia.
I did it on behalf of every Filipino person whose human rights have been abused by the government of President Marcos and the government of President Duterte before him.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the Republic of the Philippines.
Mr. President, I welcome you to the House of Representatives chamber. Your address today is a significant occasion in the history of the House.
Our strategic partnership has grown more important than ever. We must reinforce each other's strengths. We must protect the peace that we fought for during the war and have jealously guarded in the decades since. We must oppose actions that clearly denigrate the rule of law. As in 1942, the Philippines now finds itself on the front line against actions that undermine regional peace, erode regional stability, and threaten regional success. Then as now, we remain firm in defending our sovereignty, our sovereign rights, our never tire of repeating the declaration that I made from the first day that I took office. I will not allow any attempt by any foreign power to take even 1 square inch of our sovereign territory.
Was deliberate and it was powerful. And I did it on behalf of every Filipino person whose human rights have been abused by the government of President Marcos and the government of President Duterte before him. I was appalled that President Marcos was given the opportunity to address our parliament today, the privilege to address our parliament today. As Senator Birmingham said, addressing our parliament is symbolic and it is serious. And it is appalling that a human rights abuser, a government of human rights abuse, that the President of that government should be invited to attend our parliament and speak to our parliament. I took this action after having discussions and correspondence with many Filipinos in Australia, from the Australian Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines, for the for Philippines Human Rights Network. I did it in the context of having taken part some years ago in an international civil society-led investigation into human rights in the Philippines, conducted by the International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines, where I learnt and I heard firsthand about what is going on in the Philippines, where I learnt about the extrajudicial killings, where people on trumped-up charges are red-tagged and then they are hunted down and they are killed. It's appalling, as I say, because of just what a privilege it is to address our parliament, that President Marcos was invited to do so. I am struck by I'm having a sense of motion moved against me for abusing parliamentary rights, when human rights did not rate a mention. When both the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition in their speeches today did not mention human rights at all. They are completely whitewashing, sycophantic towards the President. They are even trying to whitewash the legacy of the Marcos's father, the former dictator Ferdinand Marcos. It was the joint sitting to hear from President Marcos of the Philippines.
And you weren't happy that he was invited?
I was appalled that he was invited to address our parliament.
These are we've just got the pictures of your protest. It was
basically the sign that
pretty much a silent protest. You held up the sign.
Yeah? It was. I wasn't wanting to cause a fuss, but I felt I really needed to make a statement about the human rights abuses that are continuing in the Philippines under President Marcos. He's continued the policies of his predecessor, Duterte. There's currently an International Criminal Court investigation into the practices and the thousands of killings under Duterte's presidency. Under Marcos, we've still got the same extrajudicial killings, human rights defenders, environmentalists, workers, trade unionists being jailed. We've got, killings.
So you don't believe he should have been invited to address the Parliament? He should not have been invited. It was whitewashing the appalling human rights abuses that are going on under his government. He hasn't been president for that long. Is there rock solid evidence that those extrajudicial killings, the abuses under Duterte, are continuing now?
Absolutely, and that the people who are responsible for those killings are not being brought to account. Essentially, the judicial system is broken, and that under the guise of anti-terrorism, you've still got massive attacks, you've got bombings of regional communities. And the reason I did it was because of the Filipino community here in Australia. They reached out to me. There were a number of open letters that were sent to all parliamentarians, asking parliamentarians to really note what the appalling human rights record of President Marcos is, and the whitewashing of the dictatorship of his father as well.
Yeah, well, we do remember his father. Well, some of us do. But when you held the sign up, you were then, what happened? You were escorted out? How did that happen?
There was a note from the Speaker that was sent to me with the Sergeant of Arms asking me to leave the chamber because of disorderly conduct. So I was proud to have been there to hold up the sign, and I left the chamber
so you weren't escorted out, you just received a note? And
yes, well, the Sergeant of Arms escorted me out.
Okay. Yeah. But you followed the request.
Yeah, and to me, I mean, I speak up for human rights abuses wherever they occur in the world, whether it's the Philippines, whether it's China, whether it's here in Australia, Myanmar, Afghanistan, and I really felt it was my responsibility to be speaking up for really brave people.
Did you have a second thought, though, in terms of the fact that it was a big moment in Australia-Philippines relations?
No, and I really support the Filipino community. I really want to emphasise how I've got a huge amount of respect and support for the Filipino community and the people of the Philippines, but they deserve better as in their government than people who are, You weren't
worried that it would undermine our efforts to build ties with Manila?
We need to have human rights at the centre of all of our relationships with other countries. If we turn a blind eye to human rights, that's an attack on democracy and it's an attack on ourselves, because human rights matter no matter where people are living in the world.
As I said, you got a big day thrown out of the House of Reps, but you've also got today the anti-poverty report. Right. We've spoken about it before. What's it found?
Yes, well, yesterday we tabled the final report of my inquiry, the Senate Community Affairs Committee's inquiry into the extent and impact of poverty in Australia. And it's the number one recommendation of the majority report of our committee was that there needs to be urgent action to address poverty in Australia, to ensure that people aren't living in poverty.
How widespread is it?
Oh, it's appalling. There are millions of Australians who are just struggling to live, who struggle to decide whether they're going to put food on the table or pay for their medical bills.
And exacerbated by the cost of living.
That's right. Families living in cars with children. We're better than this as a country. We're a rich country, and the fundamental thing we need to do is to be completely overhauling our social security system so that people have got enough income support so they can live, whether they are on the DSP, whether they're between jobs, whether they're struggling with their health. People should be able to live with dignity and not be living in poverty.
Senator Janet Rice, thanks. Appreciate your time.
Thanks very much, Kieran.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the Republic of the Philippines.
Mr. President, I welcome you to the House of Representatives chamber. Your address today is a significant occasion in the history of the House.